Hello and welcome to a new video on TCGplayer.com. My name is Steve Rubin. This week we're playing Grixis Delver. I think that actually I had played before in a Grand Prix, I believe Grand Prix Charlotte, a long time ago now, maybe 8 months ago now. And this is a deck that won the last World Magic Cup qualifier in the US, but piloted by Kevin Jones. Now this is a deck that I always loved. I love the counter magic. I love being able to play a long grindy game with Snapcaster Mage and Culligan's Command and stuff. It's got a lot of resiliency, but it also has a lot of speed and power and disruption, so it does a lot of things well. Let's go ahead and just talk about this list in general. This list is a more, I'm not going to say aggressive version, but it's very counterspell light, and is also playing Young Pyromancer, which is a big difference between the Grixis Delver decks I played in the past. I never played the Young Pyromancer Pro package. I would always play more control-y cards, more cards that are consistent, and it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, this just won a tournament, so I like to sometimes, the best thing when you're picking up a deck that just did well in a tournament, play the exact copy of the deck, figure out what you like, what you don't like. There's a lot of things about this deck that are different from what I like to play as like a Magic player, just the Pyromancer and the Desolate Lighthouse and the Sideboard and Painful Truth kind of card in the sideboard. Like, it's interesting because I'm hopefully you'll get to learn a lot about how this specific iteration of Grixis Delver works. I'm pretty excited. My one worry is that this deck can't really beat Bant Eldrazi, because I know that when I was playing Bant Eldrazi, I actually would just crush Grixis Delver whenever I got played against it, to the point where you just haven't seen it very often. But I think that Bant Eldrazi hasn't been doing too well, and I don't think it's an unlosable matchup or anything. So let's go ahead and get into the deck here. We have 19 lands. Kevin decided to play 9 fetch lands, which is sometimes the 19th/20th land is like a Tar Pit or another Darksix Shores. Here we have 5 Delve spells, so I think playing an extra fetch land is completely reasonable, though it does deal you more damage, especially when you're playing probes. We have, of course, 3 Taxium Probe, a weird number, but the problem is, like, drawing multiple probes is usually not great. Like, yeah, it's good if you have specifically Young Pyromancer, but just even against some of the control decks of the format, or decks like Abzan that are mid-rangey, you don't want to deal yourself 5 to 7 damage. That's going to make it a lot easier for them to kill you. So 3 probes, get to see your hand, gives us more instant and sorceries, which synergize with Delver, Snapcaster, and Pyromancer. And then we have Serum Visions, kind of our setup, which is sort of, a staple in any blue deck, especially any deck that's playing Delver of Secrets. Just, it's not the greatest, but it helps us flip our Delvers, it helps us fill our graveyard for our Delve spells, it helps us find our specific answers, like Culligan's Command and Terminate. 2 Spell Snare. Spell Snare is great. It's unfortunate. You can't really play more than 2, because there are some decks, I mean, you can, but you can't really push it on Spell Snare. It's really good when it's good, but there are some decks that just will be able to play around it, or they'll just not have that many 2-drops at all. Or like a deck like Junk, they'll know your hand a lot because of Inquisition of Kozilek, which makes it a lot less powerful than it could be. The potential for it anyway. Thought Scour, important, probably one of the most important cards of the deck. It just fuels Snapcaster and your Delve spells. It lets you play your Taskers on turn 2 pretty consistently, and definitely on turn 3 with like Mana Leak backup potentially, which is really nice. Lightning Bolt, the most played card in Modern, great with Snapcaster Mage, great at finishing people off. Just obviously we're going to play 4 Lightning Bolts in any red deck pretty much in Modern. That's not a dedicated combo deck. We have 2 Terminates. Let's start at the top. We have 2 Mana Leaks, which usually this deck plays a split between Mana Leak and Remand, and usually it's somewhere in the range of like 4 or 5 total. We're only playing 2 Mana Leaks, which is interesting. Like, we're being a lot more proactive. Instead of sitting back on Mana Leak, yeah, it's great when you're already ahead on board, but it's bad when you don't have any threats in play. And instead of the remands, essentially we're just putting our Young Pyromancers in play and putting pressure on our opponent, which I like. Well, I mean, I like about this list. I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but I like it. 4 Snapcaster Mages. Obviously, it's kind of, talking about this deck, it's very, a lot of cards are shoe in, and part of the reason this deck is great is just Snapcaster Mage is so good late game with Culligan's Command, counter spells, just Lightning Bolt for reach, just everything you want it to do. Young Pyromancer, like I said, it's just a proactive option. For a long time, the decks cut this card, but now, maybe it's coming back. Maybe if I play against a deck like Bant Eldrazi or an Abzan deck, you can really, like decks where, you really force their removal early, because cards like Young Pyromancer, it's actually really tough to path the exile card like this. Because in a deck that plays Snapcaster Mage, and cards like Tassiger that are just great at utilizing extra mana, it's hard for an Abzan deck or a blue-white-red deck or a Bantho draws you deck to path something like on turn 2. It's very unlikely they're going to win if they do that. So I kind of like Young Pyromancer in a path the exile format. Terminate, just one of the best removal spells in Modern, great with Snapcaster Mage, great at answering all these threats. Actually, I feel bad. This is supposed to be a Collective Brutality. So let me just fix that really quick. Quantity 0. Oh god, sorry about this. I need to actually get that. I didn't realize I started this, but here we go. Collective Brutality. It is, you know, the new card in this deck, which is kind of exciting to see. It fills your graveyard for Tassiger. It is removal and also burn. Like, it gives you a little bit extra reach. I really like Culligan's Command, and I'm not excited about only having one, but a lot of these Grixis Delver decks would play like 1 or 2 Thoughtseize in the sideboard, and I think this is like the perfect card to bridge the gap between having a, you know, a very flexible card. You know, it lets you disrupt your opponent. It's good against aggro. It's great against some combo decks that are using creatures. You know, like Infect and potentially even Death Shadows. You can maybe get a Step Links or Swift Spear with it. So I'm pretty excited about the Collective Brutality. 1 Culligan's Command. Just a great card. You know, it loops with Snapcaster Mage. It lets you rebuy really cheap threats. It's a 2-for-1 every single time. 2 Electrolyze, just great at killing tokens, great against Affinity, great against decks with X1s, and is reasonable against some of the mid-range decks. You know, it's not great against a deck like green-black, but like, I guess, well, it is and it isn't. Like, if you can kill Dark Confidant or Grimflayer or some Lingering Souls tokens, it's good, but it's not, you know, the best answer ever. Murderous Cut is just another Terminate. Some people play 3 Terminates. When I used to play this deck, I would play 3 Terminates, no cuts, and sometimes even a Go for the Throat. But we have a Murderous Cut. Then the Delve Creatures, just solid. Pretty much, you know, it's everything in this deck is like, that's the thing about Delver decks, is I remember Blue-White Delver in Standard. The reason it was so good is every single individual card in the deck is the best card in your deck in certain situations. And essentially what that means is, you know, Lightning Bolt will be great sometimes, Snapcaster will be great sometimes, like Electrolyze will be huge. It just gives you a ton of flexibility because, you know, in some matchups, you're just going to win off of certain cards. And Tassiger is just really, really efficient. You know, you're casting it for usually 1 or 2 mana. Just gives you, it's pretty much your Tarmogoyf in this deck, and also gives you that late-game card draw engine, which is nice. Gurmag Angler, just another, Tassiger is a legendary, so you cannot play 4 of them. You're just playing the Angler instead. Let's look at the sideboard really quick. We have this is also, he's got some interesting cards in here. We have 2 Dispels, which are, you know, obviously good against Goryo's Vengeance. They're good against Collected Company Quarter Calling decks. Pretty much auto include some number of Dispel. We have a Spell Pierce, which is one of the more interesting cards in the sideboard. I'm assuming for fast combo decks like Poison, Goryo's Vengeance, can even potentially be good against some fair decks, though I think it's probably not going to be that as good as a card like Dispel or Countersquall. Countersquall, great against other blue Counterspell decks, reasonable against combo, just a solid card. It's just like a Searing Blaze Negate kind of effect, pretty strong. Then we have Surgical Extraction. You know, you need Graveyard Hate, and I actually like Surgical Extraction in a deck with Snapcaster Mage and Thoughtscour, because if you think about a card like Nihil Spellbomb, if you Thoughtscour that to your graveyard, then, you know, it's just gone forever. But we have 4 Snapcaster Mages, so I really like the use of two Surgical Extractions in this slot. You know, we're drawing cards, and if you draw Surgical, we can go Surgical, Snapcaster, Surgical, and just kind of really, really make it hard for some of the graveyard decks like Dredge or Through the Breach, Goryo's Vengeance decks to win, which is super nice. Engineer Explosives, kind of a catch-all. It's pretty good to have if you're playing against, you know, Tarmogoyf decks. You know, Abzan has Grimflayer now, so they have a lot of 2-drops. Can be reasonable against some of the aggressive decks, like any Zoo deck, but particularly the Death Shadow Zoo deck plays like 16 1-drops. So Engineer Explosives is great. Also, just carry over can kill, is like good against Boggles, is maybe another way of dealing with Ensnaring Bridge, stuff like that. Painful Truth, just a draw card for grinding matchups. I'm not really sure if you're supposed to, if Kevin was boarding this card against a deck like Jund or Abzan, because if you cast it, then like your opponent gets to resolve like a Liliana or a nice threat. So I'm not really sure if that's what this is for. Maybe just for other blue mirrors and stuff like that. Vandalblast, just anti-affinity card. Potentially good against decks like Lantern. Potentially a card that you might side in some matchups like that plays some artifacts. Like Spellskite can be annoying for you and stuff like that. 2 Magma Spray, just extra spot removal. Gets rid of things, gets rid of Matter Shaper, solid. Is a Staticaster, pretty important, really good against decks like Poison and Affinity. Solid option there. Colligan's Command, Colligan's Command is great, and against any grindy matchup, it's great, and it doubles as an excellent card against Affinity. A 1 Desolate Lighthouse, I hate this, I really do, but I'm going to try it out. We'll try to see if I can side it in. I suppose there'll be matches where I want to go up to 20 lands and then have access to this. So we will see how it goes, and I'll see you guys for round 1.